Today on Legally Us, Jen Shah asks for a reduced sentence while Amber Heard and Johnny Depp settle their case. Plus, Todd and Julie Chrisley are set to report to prison, and the latest on the Meghan Thee Stallion trial. We've got that plus so much more on today's Legally Us. Hey everyone, welcome to Legally Us. I'm Christina. That's, of course, Neama Rahmani, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers and former federal prosecutor. Hi, Neama. How are you?
Hi, Christina. How's it going?
Good, good. Lots to get to today. As always, we are creeping up on Jen Shah's sentence that is happening on January 6th, but she actually requested a reduced prison sentence after pleading guilty to wire fraud. So her plea agreement calls up to 14 years in prison, but she's asking for only 3. In court documents, her attorney said, "We submit that such a sentence is just and fair because it takes into account Ms. Shah's history and characteristics, the facts and circumstances of the offense, and meets that a court imposes sentence that is not greater than necessary to achieve the goals of punishment." Now, her legal team listed several reasons why she should serve the reduced sentence, arguing that she had no direct contact with the alleged victims and that her history and characteristics align with a smaller sentencing. She emphasized how much the case already cost Jen and caused an embarrassment, fear, and shame for her family. In a statement, Jen said, "My poor judgment and bad business associations caused innocent people to lose their money and be victimized by investing in poorly structured businesses and products that I influenced or controlled. For that, I am genuinely sorry, and I will work for the rest of my life to make it right." So is this kind of like just a last-ditch effort to see if she can get a reduced sentence, and how likely is it that she actually will?
Yeah, Christina, it's probably too little too late for Jen Shah. Let's not forget, I mean, she maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings. She went on, Andy Cohen's show and said that she was expletive innocent. Obviously, right before trial, she saw the writing on the wall and wisely took a deal. But if I'm a prosecutor handling this case, I'm going to make sure to remind the judge about all the statements that Shah made before she finally accepted responsibility. And speaking of accepting responsibility, that's something that the judges are going to look for. So this type of statement where she's kind of minimizing her conduct, saying it wasn't me who was directly ripping off these victims, and there were lots of them, many of them were elderly to the tune of $5 million, the judge might say, well, is this someone who really is doing right by these victims, or is this someone who's trying to minimize her conduct? So we'll see if it backfires with the judge.
Yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't help because the season of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is playing out right now, where she is continuing to maintain her innocence, and I'm sure prosecutors may use that in their defense as well, right?
Of course, that's something that prosecutors love to hammer home. This is someone who isn't being truthful. This is someone who isn't being genuine. This is someone that just wants less time. And, if you say things like these were just bad investments, that might piss off the judge. The judge might say these weren't bad investments. You were scamming elderly people. So it's going to be interesting to see what reaction the judge has with some of these statements, both in court, before court, and what was on Real Housewives.
I mean, your prediction, how much time do you think that she will spend? Do you think it'll be well over a decade that she'll be in prison?
I think because the government's recommending the low end of that range, right? So when you're talking about federal sentences, there's always a range and advisory guidelines. So 11 to 14, the government's going to recommend that low end, 11 years. Obviously, Shah can ask for whatever she wants. I think 3 years is way too low. I don't think the judge will go that low. But, the judge may give some sort of discount for accepting responsibility, even though it came late. If I had to guess, I think she's probably going to get somewhere within that 7 to 11 year range, Christina.
That's still a long time. And do you foresee her former assistant, getting a lesser sentence? Because he admitted guilt well before Jen did. And it seems like he's been cooperating kind of, in a way, maybe threw her under the bus a little bit.
Definitely. I think he's going to get a significantly reduced sentence for a few reasons. One, he didn't personally benefit the way Shah did, right? She got the money. 2, he accepted responsibility much, much earlier. And 3, he cooperated. That cooperation is very helpful when you have these multi-defendant cases, complex fraud or conspiracy cases. You want someone who's going to testify before the grand jury or even potentially testify at trial. And that he is probably the reason Shah ultimately pled guilty, because he was going to really be the key witness, the star witness in a trial against her. So I expect him to get a much, much lesser sentence.
Definitely. Well, we have to wait only a couple more weeks to see what her fate is. And of course, we're going to break it all down once it happens. But let's get over to Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. They have finally settled their defamation lawsuit following, of course, their high profile legal battle. She will have to pay her former husband $1 million. And she wrote on Instagram that this was really not her choice. She said, "It's important for me to say that I never chose this. I defended my truth, and in doing so, my life as I knew it was destroyed. The vilification I have faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized when they come forward. Now I finally have an opportunity to emancipate myself from something I attempted to leave over 6 years ago, and on terms I can agree to." She said, I have made no omission. This is not an act of concession. There are no restrictions or gags with respect to my voice moving forward. So are you surprised that both parties settled on $1 million?
I'm not surprised for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, this is just what we've seen from Amber Heard throughout the trial and after, and that sort of narcissism, that refusal to accept that she lost. And she kind of doubles down on her lies, right? We saw with respect to donating the money to charity from her divorce, or leaking the video to TMZ, or not using any illegal drugs, right? Despite the overwhelming jury verdict against her, she still continues to maintain that she was right. Now, with respect to Johnny Depp, I'm not surprised either. This case was never about getting money from his ex-wife, right? He wanted to clear his name. He had essentially been canceled. So this was a very public way for him to do so. So now that he's gone from being canceled to one of the most wanted actors in Hollywood, he'll make this money in one movie, probably even less. So for him to walk away from this situation with his ex, that's going to be in his best interest. And frankly, that's really what he wanted to do when he entered into that divorce settlement years ago. He wanted to walk away from Amber Heard, and he really just wanted her to keep her mouth shut. So we'll see if that happens. And if so, I think Johnny Depp will be a happy man.
So it seems like the opposite happened to Amber Heard, though. You know, she said that she was victimized on social media, you know, lost, potentially probably lost some movie roles in all of this as well. But it's interesting that she said that there are no gags or restrictions on her voice moving forward. So do you foresee her writing a tell-all book and kind of, you know, trying to profit off of this a little bit more?
I think so, Christina. Again, this is someone that really hasn't learned her lesson. She went from being the face of the Me Too movement to the face of false accusations. If I were Amber Heard, your acting career is over. No one's going to cast you anymore because you're so disliked, probably one of the most disliked women in all of America. She should just go away, lick her wounds, and stop talking about Johnny Depp. But I don't think she will. Even though she entered into the settlement, the first thing she did is post on Instagram. So either she's getting bad legal advice or bad PR advice, but she needs to stop. But I don't think she will.
Let's move on over to Todd and Julie Chrisley, because they have been ordered to report to prison at the beginning of the new year following their fraud convictions. So the U.S. Marshal's Office requested that they report to their respective institutions in Florida by January 17th. Todd will serve out his sentence at federal prison Camp Pensacola, while his wife will be a few hours away at Federal Correctional Institution in Mariana. So both reality stars will be kept in a minimum security area. And of course, he was ordered to serve 12 years. She was ordered to serve 7. They'll have 16 months of probation. And I mean, it seems like, you know, I mean, is this going to be like the Ritz-Carlton of prisons, I guess?
Not quite club fed, but it will be a low security federal prison. So that means it's a little bit more of a camp environment. You're going to see kind of bunk beds. You're not going to have cells where they're locked up. They'll be housed with other federal inmates because, again, they don't really pose a risk to anyone else, or there's no risk to them. I mean, these are fraudsters. They deserve to be in prison, but they're not quite violent inmates that you might see serving time in county or state prison.
Mm-hmm. What do you think like a day-to-day will look like for them?
Yeah, they're going to be able to interact with the general population. There are activities with respect to, you know, Todd and Julie. They continue to maintain their innocence and they're going to appeal. So I expect them to spend a lot of time in the prison library doing that legal research for that appeal.
Yeah, well, we'll see if any of that research pays off, but we'll have to wait and see. So this situation is so complicated. Moving over to Meghan Thee Stallion's. So her former bodyguard, which is a key witness in the case against Tory Lanez, has vanished ahead of her scheduled appearance in court. So Justin Edison, who is a former member of the rapper's security team, is scheduled to testify next week in the ongoing assault trial against Lanez for allegedly shooting Meghan in the foot back in 2020. So the LAPD is currently looking into the disappearance. A missing persons case had not been filed at this point, but this is so strange. So Lanez has pleaded not guilty to accusations that he shot Meghan after they left a 2020 party at Kylie Jenner's house. He's charged with assault of a firearm, illegal possession of a firearm, and negligent discharge of a gun. So she testified that he shot her because he was upset that they left the party, had an argument on the ride home. The bodyguard and Meghan's friend, Kelsey Harris, were in the car when Meghan asked to be let out. Lanez then allegedly fired several shots at her, shouting, "Dance, bitch." Well, Harris texted Meghan's manager that night saying, "Help, Tory shot Meg." However, she testified saying that she didn't see Lanez shoot Meghan. His team suggested that shooting was between Meghan and Harris. This is so complicated and so many different layers, but it seems like this case is kind of like a he said, she said type of thing. So where do you think the jury will side in all of this?
There's so much going on here, Christina, and you're right. It really is she said, he said, but really he shot or she shot, right? So I know Lanez's lawyer, and we didn't really know until opening statement what the defense was going to be, but now we know the defense isn't, I didn't shoot Meghan, but it wasn't me. It was someone else. It was Harris. So Lanez is pointing the finger at Harris. Obviously, Harris is denying it. So it's going to be interesting to see who the jury believes. Obviously, shots were fired. No one's denying that. The question is, who pulled the trigger?
And how will each side kind of prove their case? I mean, do we have fingerprints on the gun, things like that? Like how are they trying to prove this?
Yeah, that type of evidence, that scientific ballistic evidence. But really, the DA's office here is trying to prove it with independent witnesses, right? I mean, Justin has taken off, so he's not going to be testifying. It's unlikely he's going to be back by the time the trial finishes. But there's other witnesses, folks that call 911. You have text messages and people. There's a lot of people around. So people that saw and are testifying that it was Lanez, the one who pulled the trigger, and also that he had motive to do so. Whereas Harris maybe did not. Of course, Lanez's attorney is pointing to some sort of love triangle or jealousy as motive for Harris doing it.
Right. So, and what do you make of this missing bodyguard, and why aren't they filing a missing persons case? Is this just somebody that kind of fled town and just doesn't want to be involved in this?
Yeah, so Edison's under subpoena, which means he's got to show up to trial and testify. He took off for whatever reason. Maybe he didn't want to be a snitch or is worried about Lanez or some sort of retaliation that happened. So when witnesses don't show up, then the judge issues an arrest warrant, or what's called a body attachment. So it's up to the sheriffs who actually oversee the courtroom to go arrest that person. Now, LAPD obviously has jurisdiction as well, but living in LA and working in LA, I can tell you that unless someone's kidnapped or worse, that's not something that the LAPD detectives make a priority. There's so much going on in the city of LA. A witness not showing up, unfortunately, is low on that list. So I wouldn't expect Edison to be arrested in time to testify in this case.
Yeah. What a messy case, but we will be following it each and every way. Well, Neama, thank you so much for breaking it all down for me, as always.
Thanks so much, Christina. Have a great holiday, and I'll see you next year.
You too. For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below, and visit usmagazine.com.